Is tanking in the NBA over as we know it? The NBA looks a lot different this season. Let's get into it. Hi guys, it's Devin Howard. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me there as @DevinHoward. Subscribe to the Fumble, tap the bell for notifications. Do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button and let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below. In the NBA, teams have basically only two options to please their fans. They can either have a winning season and enjoy success in the moment, especially when that success means title contention, or they can excite fans with the promise of a hopeful future thanks to tanking. They'd get better picks in the upcoming draft, allowing them to entice young players about the idea of joining a fresh new core. But is tanking as we know it completely over? The standings look a lot more close this season than they ever have before. Here's what's happening. Currently, we have 24 teams that are still pushing for something. They haven't given up. That's 24 teams out of 30. Some are closer to the top and they're hoping for a top 4 seeding and a home court advantage. Others are pushing for a place in the top 6. And then there are the teams who are pushing to be a 7th through 10th seed to earn a spot in the play-in tournament. So that means that out of 30 teams in the NBA, there are 24 who are still vying for a spot in the playoffs. That's actually remarkable when you think about it. It is totally outrageous compared to previous seasons. We haven't seen this many teams optimistic about a playoff spot ever before. The NBA's Executive Vice President of Basketball Strategy and Analytics said, quote, 24 is the highest we've ever had in the history of the league with a month left. At this stage, we'd see a lot more teams who had already started the tanking process in order to improve their odds in the upcoming draft. But this season, we're not seeing that. Well, so how did this even happen? Let's talk about it. Apparently, the biggest gap a team has overcome to make the playoffs with 15 games left in a season is 4 games. That's happened only 2 times in NBA history, so it's obviously not a common occurrence, but it's enough to encourage the league to use that 4-game gap as their sort of marker for teams that still have a chance at contention. So when the league hit that 15-game mark last week, 24 teams were either already set to go to the playoffs or within 4 games of that 10th place spot. It's really pretty wild when you think about it. At this point, there are only 6 teams who are completely out of playoff contention: the Cavaliers, the Pistons, Magic, Rockets, Timberwolves, and Thunder. The biggest change here, I think, was adding in that playoff tournament. That incentivized the more middle-of-the-road teams to continue fighting instead of tanking. So teams like the Wizards, Bulls, Raptors, Warriors, Spurs, Pelicans, and the Kings, who might have given up in previous years, are still hanging on to that glimmer of hope. And not only that, but in 2019, the NBA flattened the draft lottery odds, which made it less appealing to horrifically tank a team like we used to see. You guys all remember that, and if you don't, it used to work like this. The team with the worst record had the greatest odds of winning the top draft pick and was guaranteed a top 4 pick. The team with the second worst record had a just under 20% chance of getting the number 1 pick, and the team with the third worst record had a 15.6% chance. Now, the teams with the 3 worst records all have identical odds of winning the top pick and of picking in the top 4. The 4th worst team in the league is not that far behind. So now when you break it down like that, there's less motivation to be at the bottom of the standings. In fact, there's still a reason to win for a lot of these teams in the NBA. Now, just because tanking as we used to see it seems to be over, doesn't mean teams haven't been doing it to some extent. So let's discuss that a little bit. The Thunder took out Al Horford even though he was healthy back in March so that they could focus on developing their youth. Okay. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has also been out due to a foot issue. They're obviously being conservative with these players because there's no point in putting their bodies on the line and risking their physical health when they aren't even contenders for the playoffs. Toronto was actually fined by the NBA for violating resting rules. They were sitting out multiple players at a time. And then the Rockets do seem to be in a bit of a race to the bottom of the records. So let's quickly discuss what some of these tanking teams need going into the draft. Like I mentioned, teams like the Rockets, Thunder, and Magic have all made a conscious effort to weaken themselves in order to build draft equity and acquire strong young talent. There are currently 6 teams who are no longer in contention for the playoffs, and here's where they could improve the most. The Cavaliers would likely benefit from having someone like Jarrett Allen on their roster. He's a strong defender. Opponents hit just 49.1% of their attempts within 6 feet when he's on the floor. He also has a career field goal percentage of 61.4% and a defense rebound rate that has ranked in the top 20% among big players in the last 2 years. Cleveland is going to have to work around his restricted free agency this summer, but I think it's something that they can still manage. Having somebody like Jarrett Allen on their roster would really help them quite a bit. Now let's discuss Houston next. The Rockets got a ton of draft picks in the James Harden deal, but they ultimately ended up on the short end of the stick when it comes to players who will matter to the franchise's future. But they do have full control over the Brooklyn Nets first rounder through 2027, which is a very, very, very powerful tool. Right now, their draft equity is strong, and if they use it well, they'll become relevant again. The Thunder are in a bit of a similar position to the Rockets right now. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is already producing like a star player, so with some strong draft picks, they'll actually be probably in very good shape. He's out right now with that foot issue I mentioned earlier, but when he's on the floor, he's an excellent ball handler with some solid stats. The Orlando Magic is making the right choice to essentially start over right now. Their roster is filled with young talent that have yet to prove themselves, so they're free to hit the draft with a best player available mentality, which could put them in a good position moving forward. All right, now we have to talk about the Timberwolves. The biggest issue with the Timberwolves is defense. They seriously need to bump it up. With Karl Anthony Towns, D'Lo, and Anthony Edwards on the floor, they should have a top 10 offense. So now they need to fill that gap in their roster with defense-first players. Of course, that's a lot easier said than done, but this is something that they really should be focusing on. So tanking isn't necessarily over for good, but with the flattened draft lottery odds, the de-incentivization of having the worst record, new NBA resting rules, and the play-in tournament, it all paints a new picture of what it really means to be a tanking team. It's definitely interesting to consider how different the NBA looks this season. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Do you think that tanking is over? Is it a good idea for tanking to be done, or did you like to see that happen? Sound off in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell. I'm Devin Howard for The Fumble, and I'll see you guys later.